Welcome back. Native Americans have been struggling with the right to have a voice in the U.S. government since the nation was born. In 1870, when the 15th Amendment was ratified, giving freed slaves the right to vote, Native Americans were still generally barred from voting on the grounds that they were citizens of their tribal nations, not the United States. 54 years later, in 1924, the Indian Citizenship Act officially declared that anyone born on tribal lands in the U.S. was a citizen. But several states quickly enacted laws similar to those that denied African Americans the right to vote and applied them to Native American citizens. It took another 38 years for Native Americans to be fully enfranchised when, in 1962, the New Mexico State Supreme Court finally struck down the last laws preventing Native Americans from exercising their rights. And then 3 years later, in 1965, the Voting Rights Act included Native Americans in the class of minorities historically prevented from voting. But just last year, North Dakota implemented a new voter ID law. Your ID needs to show your name, date of birth, and residential address. Here's the problem. In North Dakota and other rural areas, especially on Native American reservations, many people don't have residential addresses. Instead, they use post office boxes. You're familiar with that. And the Supreme Court declined to hear the case last month. Tribal officials have been working furiously to assign addresses to these American citizens and get them new IDs so they can exercise their right to vote 4 days from now.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg did write an opinion on this to say this is very confusing because a lot of those Native Americans being denied the right to vote now were able to vote under the law that was in place during the primaries. Jenny Monet joins us now. She's an independent journalist who covers Native American issues. Jenny, what's it like for a Native American citizen who lives on tribal land to vote in terms of ideas, in terms of polling stations, in terms of outreach from the parties and information on the candidates?
Well, it's definitely a challenge. I mean, I grew up on an Indian reservation and I didn't have an address. We all have P.O. boxes. And here in North Dakota, where I am in Fort Yates, it's different because North Dakota is the only state in the country that doesn't have a voter registration system. And that says a lot about North Dakota. It's a very slow-paced kind of living out here in the prairie. And really, when I've spoken to some of the auditors around the very latest around this controversial voter ID law, what they tell me is that it's a cumbersome process and a process that they've not really had to contend with because they haven't had a lot of issues of having people, newcomers coming into town and having a lot of change, to be quite honest. People know who their neighbors are and their precincts are quite small when you look at it population by population.
Well, the good thing is more and more Americans want to vote, and this issue has been raised in the last few months. Is there any chance there will be any sort of emergency ruling in the next 4 days that will help people who still don't have physical addresses?
So this week we saw a couple of actions happen in the court. Spirit Lake Nation, along with 6 other plaintiffs, filed a temporary restraining order to put a block on this voting ID law, and that was denied yesterday in federal court. It's still unclear whether or not the tribe or any of the plaintiffs will come forward to try to appeal that at this late hour. What I think is remarkable in all of this is that just like Justice Ginsburg had raised questions about whether or not this late hour decision on this voter ID law would be confusing were the same reasons the district judge yesterday had rejected the request of the tribe to put a block on this, and that making this change at this late hour would be confusing. And I just think that everyone mostly who's been grappling with this late hour change to get these addresses to people who did not have them so that they're eligible to vote, everyone has come across some kind of unique situation.
Yep.
Because in large part, it's been a process that's been untested and unplanned.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.